So we're going to continue to discuss some lessons from last week's reading, which is Parshat Toldot, which is, or otherwise known as Parshat Toldot, which is in chapter 25 of Genesis. And, it goes on up until the beginning half of chapter 28. So we'll be discussing some of the issues and some of the narratives, the stories that are discussed there. The reading is about Isaac and the birth of his children. So in other words, we're going to be talking about Isaac, Rebecca, Esau, and Jacob, but primarily I'm going to refer to him as Esau because I prefer that than to the English, but it's the same person. If anyone has familiar with the English version of the name, I'm fascinated by the relationship of Isaac and Esau. What is this? What was the love that Isaac had for Esau? How did it develop? Was it just simply a father's unconditional love for his son? That could be a very simple and possible explanation. But anyway, we'll get to that. So that's actually the issue I was thinking about all week. I was thinking about this question. But before we get to that and interrelated to that, I wanted to discuss Rebecca. And I wanted to discuss Rebecca's struggle, anguish, birth pains, not birth, but pregnancy pains that she was having. So in chapter 25, it talks about the conception and gestation, I guess you could say, of Esau and Jacob. Again, Esau and Jacob, as little babies, as little, in their mother's womb. So first of all, she has no children. Many, many years go by. They actually, Isaac and Rebecca, Isaac waits until, she's of an age of maturity to have children. They wait 10 years. She still doesn't have children. They each pray. We discussed that the other week. And finally, Isaac prays and prays and prays and prays. He prays a lot and he's answered, and Rebecca conceives. And then we see in verse 22 that it says that the children in her womb, inside of her, they were knocking around. And they were giving her a lot of distress. So she says, if so, then why? Technically, literally, the read is it says, then why is this me? And Rashi comes to try to explain he's bothered by this expression. And he says, it means, why is this to me, this great pain of childbirth? Well, not really childbirth, of pregnancy. Why is this happening? Or more to say, like, why did I pray? Actually, what Rashi says is, why did I pray to become pregnant if this was the result? If I'm in so much pain, why did I pray for this? That's what he said. Why is this? Why did I pray if this is the result of it? So, that itself is difficult. Why would a righteous woman complain? It seems very simple. She's basically saying she's frustrated because of her pain, and she's saying, I wish I never did this. That's a very 21st century attitude. Women did go through pain during pregnancies and childbirth. She wanted children. She wasn't aware that she may have a lot of, there may be all kinds of difficulties. Sure, the simple explanation is that's the case, but there has to be more here. And this doesn't teach us anything if that's the case. In fact, it's not a good lesson at all. It's hard to understand that. Is this the same person that last week as a young child fed, all of Eliezer's camels all by herself, and now she's complaining about the pain of of the pregnancy seems a little strange. Unless there's a different thing going on here, and that is she so doesn't understand, that if she has such a child that's so disturbed, then why did she pray for this pregnancy? In other words, obviously, she wanted to have good children, and her concern is this is a child that is not a happy child. This is an angry child. This is an overly active child. Is a sign of discomfort, maybe of anger or aggression. And if that's the case, then if that's the case, then why did I pray to conceive if this is the kind of child that I'm going to have? There's some who say, because, our sages say that when Rebecca would pass by a holy place, when she would pass by a house of study of Shem and Aber, then she would feel contractions. And similarly, if she had passed by a house of idolatry, she'd feel contractions. So this caused her a lot of distress. She's like, my baby doesn't know what it wants. My baby is confused. My baby's going nowhere. It wants this, it wants the other thing. This is not good. It doesn't have not only, so, I think, first of all, just the very fact that the baby was having contractions by a house of idolatry, I'm sure she found very disturbing. But maybe even more disturbing was that it seemed that to her, she thought this child was completely confused. Because if the child knows what it wants, at least it's mentally healthy, and maybe with proper teaching, you can get it on the right path. But if the child is doing this, doing that, it seems like something's just wrong with it. Does that make any sense? So, and by the way, there's another reason that you have to, I think that understanding that Rebecca understood there was something strange going on with her children, understanding her complaints and her worry about, and when she says, why is this me? That she's referring more to the child and her own discomfort. I think we see that from her response to the pain. Her response was, it says she went to seek out guidance from God. Well, if she was having kind of pains, what does that have to do with seeking guidance from God? She could have sought prayers to try to, someone to pray for her, maybe that she should cease to have the pain. But what was the guidance she was looking for? It clearly seems that she was bothered about the child. She wanted to know what was going on with these children. And that's also what we see in the next verses, that the answer she got from Shem, doesn't say his name, but as she went to the house of God to ask, what does God say about these children? The response was, you have two nations in your stomach. You have two nations inside you. Two kingdoms that will separate from you. And it says, and from nation to nation, as one nation becomes strong, one will overcome the other. And the older one, or the more powerful one, will serve the younger. Or can also be read, the more powerful one will serve the younger, meaning you could also put a comma there. It's interesting. The end of the verse says that the older one, or the more powerful one, will serve the younger. But you could also read it this way: the older will the younger serve. You can read it both ways, which is actually the case, right? Because it really depends, as we'll soon discuss. So the point is she finds out that it's not one child, it's two children. So this seems to calm her down somehow when she realizes there are two of them. And so in other words, one of them has a proclivity to good, to want to, seek out God. And the other one has a proclivity to idolatry. And for somehow this seemed to satisfy her. We see at least there's no response to this. This is what she's told, and she accepts this. Now, what is the lesson we can learn from this? What is the lesson, the timeless lesson that we learn from this story of Rebecca's pregnancy with the two children. Again, with that, we will find out later that the oldest one is Esau and the younger one is Jacob. What's the lesson? I think there's an incredible practical lesson that is really fundamental to Judaism from this little discussion. So what are we talking about here? We're talking about conflict. We're talking about inner conflict. Inside, the person passes by something good. There's an opportunity to serve God. They feel like doing it. There's an opportunity to do the opposite. They also feel like doing it. That's the contractions. There's some disturbance. There's some, so the point is each one of us has two nations inside of us, right? In other words, according to Jewish thought, particularly Hasidic thought, so in general, we say there's the good inclination and evil inclination, right? In Hasidic parlance, they talk about the divine soul and an animal soul. So there's really two. So I think there are times in a person's life, particularly when a person is younger, but throughout a person's life, we may often feel extremely conflicted, and that feeling of being very conflicted is very disturbing. It's very exhausting, and it just in general, it's demoralizing, potentially. It could be demoralizing. But the answer is what the prophet told Rebecca: don't worry. There's two different forces. It's not you. There's two different things. There are two different souls inside that are doing this, and this is normal. It's completely normal. It's not that there's like you have one brain and you're what do they call that, schizophrenic? I mean, that's the slang. They call someone a split personality schizophrenic, but it's actually personality disorder, right? Is a more correct term for it. So it's not that you don't have a personality disorder. There's every person there's two nations, two, so to speak, powers, two souls. One is seeking out to follow its passions and to break free of responsibility, and the other one is seeking out responsibility, is seeking out to be close to God and to serve God and to find good missions and to work hard at them. It's two completely different inclinations in a person. And a person can feel like Rebecca, extremely distraught by this. But the answer is, when you know there are two, guess what you can do? You can strengthen one and weaken the other one. So in other words, basically what that means is, when you know that, when the person feels like doing certain things that their conscience says that I don't know, it's not something I want to be doing, they don't have to feel like this is really a part of me that I am denying. This is me wanting. This is really me, and I'm constricting and killing a part of myself. Person doesn't have to feel like that, because there's the other part, which is the more real part of who we are. It's the deeper part of who we are. Again, from a Hasidic, from a mystical perspective, and even really from a rational perspective, our whole life and being comes from God. So in that case, our essential life force is godly, of everything in the world. And the parts of us that want to reject, God's commandments and our conscience and so on and so forth, those are really just as it talks about in Kabbalah and Chassidus. Those things are like shells. Those things are covers. Those things are camouflaging over the true source of existence that's inside the person. But that doesn't take away from the facts. Okay, now we know there are two distinct souls going on within us. And so we don't have to feel like, I need to listen to this lustful soul or this reckless part of me, because if I don't listen, then I'm basically repressing myself. No, you don't have to feel like that, because there's two parts of you. And by the way, whenever you listen to one, you're repressing the other one. So there's no, it's not, oh, now I'll be free. Now I can be self-expressive. No, you're really not. Because in other words, if the person does listen to the more animalistic side and egotistical side of themselves, they're repressing the other side. And you know what? We feel that, right? We really do. We feel that, because then there are moments when a person falls into or follows, for example, a lot of modern dogma, they'll say, if you feel like it, do it. And a person does that. Person does, follows their impulses, and then they feel really lousy, and they'll want to tell you that, oh, this is, learned responses because of things you've been told. No, could that really be true when a person feels a deep emptiness that it's coming from being taught? I don't think so. That's the other part of the person, waking up and feeling terrible, feeling empty, feeling hungry for holiness, feeling hungry for meaning, feeling hungry for doing the right thing, what their conscience is telling them to do, to be an upright person, to be a helpful member of society, and so on and so forth. And most of all, really, the deepest part is to be connected to God in the way that particular being was meant to be, in the way it was, in the Garden of Eden, to be upright. As the verse says, a man was created to be upright. Person was made to be upright, not to be corrupted. This is not really the person's way a person was supposed to be. That doesn't deny the fact that a person has a lot of impulses that we have to restrain, and that it really is a war. But nevertheless, the point is, look, you can go one way or the other way. And that's why the verse continues. One overpowers the other. And that is the rule. One overpowers the other. It's always a war. One has to take control, because they are opposites. You cannot follow one and say, okay, I'm at peace. You're only denying the other one. But there's another lesson here, and that is the way to defeat one is making the other stronger. So obviously, what are we trying to do here? The question that a person of Ben Noach who was trying to follow Torah will ask themselves is, so what do? I don't want to be in this crazy conflict. I don't want to be constantly tested. I don't want to be tempted. And I want to follow the right way. What do I do to strengthen my good side, the divine soul, the good in me, right? The part of me that wants to connect to God. How do I strengthen that part over the part that wants me to follow bodily and animalistic impulses or egotistical impulses? So the answer is, make one stronger than the other. How do you do that? Well, it's like exercise. How do you get your body strong? Use it. Whatever it is that you want to be strong, work it out. It's the same thing here. You want your holy soul to be strong, your godly side of you, the side of you that follows the conscience to be strong, the upright side of you to be strong, then do good things. Do good. Study Torah, say words of prayer, and do good things. And again, flex that muscle. You know how? You feel like doing something impulsive, don't do it. Work that muscle of self-restraint and discipline on yourself. And by the way, guess what you're going to find? That not only are you a better human being, but your whole life's better. You're not waking up at any old time anymore. You're not wasting half your time at the job anymore. You're a much more leaner, effective machine. Not that you're a machine, but the point is, you can be like a machine when you want to. Suddenly, you're a lot more effective than you were before. How did that happen? My point is that through flexing this muscle, you become a more disciplined person, and that overflows into other areas of your life. That even overflows into your personal self-interested areas, things that you need for your own survival, livelihood, taking care of your home, taking care of paying that insurance bill, whatever it is, whatever it needs doing, you're on it, right? And you feel, and you're habituated to it, as opposed to, in other words, when you get up in the morning, what is the first thing you reach for? Are you reaching for your cell phone? Put that down. Stop looking at things when you wake up in the morning. First, you get up, wash yourself. You're not obligated to say Modani, but, the first thing in the morning, think about, be grateful to God that he gave you back your soul, and take some time right away. Sit down, have a coffee, study some Torah, pray, some point, take a shower, exercise. Early in the morning, this is my advice. I'm not giving advice that I don't do myself, by the way. And then, you go on with the rest of your day. And then at night, once again, according to Jewish tradition, again, we study, we pray. And obviously for men, there's also the prayer. There's also prayer in the middle of the day. But at the very least, the beginning of the day, at the end of the day, you begin your day and you end your day meditating on God with prayer. And, and in the midst of that day, during that time of that day, give charity, help people, and do your job well. Do your job well with an intent to help the people that you're meant to serve in an honest, sincere way, to help others. And of course, you can listen. We have to make money, but in a way where we're focusing on the part of our job that is, a part of a functional, productive part of society that provides a service to the rest of society. So that your whole day now becomes doing good. You're doing good throughout your day, even when you go to work, as opposed to, and that's a very common situation, by the way. A person has a Rebecca pregnancy in their life, where in the beginning of the day, they're praying or studying Torah, and they go to work, and suddenly they become very shark-like, and they're just thinking of themselves and how they can make a lot of money and sometimes take from others and be very competitive. So obviously, this is not that's a little bit schizophrenic. It's not only schizophrenic, but it's also shows a lack of faith. In other words, a person is keeping God in the synagogue, so to speak, or in their home, but then when they go out, it's like there's a different dominant force. God forbid. This is forbidden. Forbidden. If God reigns everywhere, then we have to think of him whatever we're doing, wherever we're going. And this is really also what Judaism is all about. And that's going to bring us to our next point, actually, very, very soon. So to summarize, the point is that conflict is normal. In other words, moral conflict is normal. It's the way a human being is created. There's nothing to feel demoralized about. No matter what it is that the person might have a sudden impulse to do, that's the side of the person that should be rejected. But nevertheless, you can be calm about it. You don't have to feel like, first of all, a person doesn't have to feel like this is me and I'll never change. That's not the case. This can be overcome by flexing the divine soul, the holy, good conscience soul of the person, which and flex that muscle, do a lot of good, empower that, and also think a lot, make a strong connection with God in prayer, and that will have an effect throughout the day. And you'll find that your days, God willing, are different. And you'll find that hopefully that when one overcomes the other, it's going to be your good side overcoming the good intellectual divine side, overcoming the bestial, impulsive, egotistical other side. And hopefully that way you'll have peace. That is, so I hope you all get there and continue. We have to keep working on it continuously, everyone on his own level. And it becomes more and more sensitive. It becomes more and more as people improve and habituate themselves more. Then there's another level. They can improve more. They can be more. I'd always say more particular in how they serve God and so on. and keep correcting things and keep refining things and never stop in terms of their improvement and way they treat other people and so on. And for example, you can go from first not giving charity or not really helping people to overcoming the feeling of not wanting to and doing it until getting to a place where you're actually seeking it out, like Abraham, like you spoke about the other week. Person is seeking out opportunities to give charity or to help somebody. They see someone who maybe needs something and they're going out and the person changed over years and years. They changed themselves. They became a different person. And, isn't that a wonderful, amazing thing? And person, you can be a creator like God. You can create yourself. You can create yourself into a different person who affects all people around you, and obviously a person's children and family. Okay. Any questions or comments on this? Okay, going once, going twice. Okay. So the next story, it talks about how, after Esau and Jacob are born, and it tells us how Esau is born matured with a lot of hair, and Jacob is very smooth-skinned, and evidently not as matured at birth as Esau is. Anyways, they grow up, the children mature, they become 13, and each one goes in his own way. And it says that Esau, and right now still in chapter 25, verse 27. It says that the boys grew up, and Esau, he was a man who knew hunting, a man of the field. And Jacob was a man of simplicity, sitting in tents, which in Jewish tradition is symbolic for Torah study. Till today it's called sitting and learning. Till this very day, still called that way. It originates from the Yiddish expression "sitzen and lernen," which means to sit and learn. So this was the way it was described, and evidently from all the way from biblical times, it talks about he was sitting in tents. What is he doing sitting in a tent there? He was studying. So in verse 28, it says, Isaac loved Esau because he put game in his mouth. And Rebekah loved Jacob, and doesn't give any reason. I find this verse very mysterious. Particularly, obviously, the first part, that Isaac loved Esau because he put game in his mouth. This is bizarre. Here we're talking about, as a young man, he was ready to give up his life to God. This is the man that had dialogue with God in the fields that we talked about last week. That Rebekah was in awe of, that prayed and God answers in prayer and gave his wife with barren children. And now he loves his son that brings him a good steak. This is very weird. This doesn't make sense. This is bizarre. How do we understand this? The second part, Rebekah loved Jacob, and there's no reason given for that. That's also interesting. Doesn't say because he was, righteous, he was sitting in tents, nothing. She just loved him. Doesn't give any reason. But the truth is, at the same time, the fact that it gives a reason why Isaac loved Esau is also very telling. Why didn't it just say he loved Esau, and that's his oldest son? Do we need a reason? So it seems like Esau was a hunter. He went out into the fields. Jacob stayed home. He really didn't go out much. Esau was the man who went out into the world, was strong, and but he was this person in the extreme. I mean, he wasn't just a man who was a craftsman or a businessman. He was a hunter. So he was like the alpha male, right? I mean, he was basically, the guy who was really strong going hunting, and that's what he did. In fact, Rashi comments that basically, I mean, he was kind of a loafer. I mean, in the way simply that he wasn't a working man. He didn't have a job. He'd make his way by being a hunter. He was basically an adventurer, so to speak. I mean, in those days, that's what he did. He went out in the field, he caught game, he came home, and he gave his father the game. Now, Isaac is a very holy person. And if you want to say, maybe you'll ask me the question, well, maybe he used to be, maybe he isn't anymore, right? But we see later on in this same reading that both Esau and Jacob are running after to get Isaac's blessings. You think they're doing that for anybody? I mean, clearly, Isaac was an extremely holy person. And Rebecca understood that also, that if Isaac is planning on blessing his son, his eldest son, she better make sure it's Jacob and not Esau, because if Esau gets it, the whole world's in trouble. But anyway, we'll get to that a little bit later. So my point is, we have to go with the assumption, we need to assume that Isaac is a very holy man. And therefore, we have to understand this idea of why did he love Esau, and why did he love the food that he brought for him so much? So again, if we use some of the fundamental ideas in traditional Judaism, we can very much understand this. It's an interesting thing in Jewish life in general, particularly Orthodox Jewish life, is that the young man, he stays in the yeshiva, in the house of study, until he becomes an adult, and then he gets married, and suddenly, there's all these other Torah responsibilities that have to do with actual living, right? You have to get married, you have to take care of children, you have to take care of your wife, you have to support her, right? And it's all how things out in the world here. My point is that that the God's command, as we see it here in the Hebrew Bible, is to do a lot of things in the world, physical things. It's not just person should isolate, meditate, and seclude themselves from the world, but it's to interact with the world, whether and by doing so, to bring divinity into the world, and to uplift and elevate the physical material world. And as we know from Hasidic teachings, this is actually the whole mission. The mission is to bring divinity into the material world. The purpose actually is here, not to escape to go someplace else, but to make this world a dwelling place for God. So obviously, if you think about it this way, then maybe Isaac's approach to Esau isn't so crazy after all, right? In fact, this kind of turns things on its head. Obviously, what Jacob was doing was wonderful, but at the end of the day, it's not the final objective. Final objective is going out and living a proper life outside. So obviously, Isaac assumed that his son was living such a life. Not only that, he reinforced it, because as Rashi tells us, in his translation, in his explanation of verse 27, that Esau was a man who knew how to hunt. So Rashi explains this means not just literal hunting, but also means he knew how to deceive. In other words, he knew, because it means, what does a hunter do? He traps. Esau was a person who knew how to entrap others, to deceive them, and to, pull them along into manipulating them into doing what he wanted, right? So the point is that Esau was fooling Isaac into believing that he was a good person, an upright person. And so obviously Isaac had tremendous amount of respect for his older son because he was going out into the world and still he was behaving in the proper way according to Torah as he went out into the world. In fact, what do our sages say? Our sages say that Esau would ask, do I need to tithe salt? In other words, he'd come home and ask his father questions about halacha, about Jewish law, what was the proper thing to do. So this was wonderful to Isaac. He said, look at this. What a fine son I have. He behaves as he should. He goes out into the world. It's true. His behavior is a little strange that he's a hunter. I wouldn't say that's the best. That's the most honest way to make a living. But at the same time, he, as we say in Hebrew, he was dan l'kaf zchus. What does that mean? He judged Esau favorably from the fact that two things. He honored him so much, and he would come and bring food for his father, and he would ask questions about what the proper behavior was. So I was Isaac's understanding that Esau was a man who went out into the world and used his aggressive strength for good, to behave in the proper, to catch game, that was not theft, to bring it home, and to give his father good food from it. I also think there's a mystical allusion here also. And this idea that says Isaac loved Esau because he put game in his mouth. Again, thinking about that Isaac was such a righteous and saintly man and holy man, as we'll see later that he was able to smell, the scent of the Garden of Eden on Jacob. So what do you think he was tasting here in the food? That he says he loved Esau because he tasted he liked the taste of his game. I would like to suggest that he tasted in the food, he had a sense in the food that there were holy sparks in the food, that there was holiness in the food that he was being given. And this told him it had to be that Esau was, honestly bringing home this game. It wasn't stolen. And that Esau was really had good intentions and was assisting in the process of elevating the world. And that the food that he would bring back actually contained a lot of holiness in it that could be elevated through a righteous person eating it. And actually, this is something, in Hasidic thinking that is discussed quite a bit about the idea of eating for the sake of heaven, and how through that all the godly energy that's in food is extracted from its physicality and returns to its holy source, which is part of the mission that human beings are supposed to accomplish in this world. So that's my mystical reading. There's an allusion here that Isaac tasted the food and he was able to sense the extraction of holiness in this food, and therefore, in his opinion, Esau must be actually very upright person despite appearances. So what's the lesson? So the lesson here is that even though studying Torah and being secluded is a very high level and brings a lot of holiness into the world, the majority of people, this is not what they're supposed to do. In fact, obviously, the Bnei Noach, their specific role is actually to interact in the world and to try to make it a more upright world and to bring holiness into the world, make it a place where God's name is mentioned, and to behave in an upright manner. In fact, here, interestingly enough, we'll see later that Esau really didn't mention God's name. But nevertheless, Isaac believed that he was behaving in a ethical manner when he conducted himself outside, and then would come back and support Torah scholars and righteous people with his efforts, and that's a very high level. In other words, if we wouldn't know Esau was behaving in an immoral way, if we knew just what Isaac knew, he's going out, he's risking his life, he's working hard, and he's bringing food back to his saintly father, and he's respecting his saintly father, and then evidently Isaac is sensing in the food that this is food that's appropriate for a holy person to eat. So in other words, it's being slaughtered properly by Esau and all these things. We do know that Esau had a lot of respect for his father. And it's most likely that when he fed his father, he respected his father and did things correctly, and only would feed him food that wasn't stolen, and he would slaughter it correctly, and so on and so forth. And Isaac sensed this, and therefore he loved this son. I could also add that I think you could also say that because he sensed Esau was in a dangerous position, or I could say he wasn't the one outstanding in Torah, not so close to holy things, not as sensitive to Torah and godliness as Jacob was. That's why he affirmatively sought to love him. He went out of his way to love Esau, to make sure to keep him in the fold. He wanted to make sure that the bond was strong, and he believed that the only way to see to it that he wasn't lost was that the bond between them would not be severed. This is also another important point, is that the person who does go out into the world needs to be bound up with the saintly people who do study Torah and pray and so on, and that's their job. And they are the leaders. So in other words, that a person who finds rabbis that they look up to, or a rebbitzin that's a female rabbi's wife, or so on and so forth, that they look up to, and or women speakers, whatever it may be. The point is to connect to those people. And you can say just in general, when the Bnei Noah, they connect to the Jewish people, and they want to support the Jewish people, and they love the Jewish people, and we need to do that back to them, just like Isaac did. And we need to build that bond. But that's how he saw Esau. He saw him as a person that understood his place as being a support as to those who were studying Torah, those who were serving God day and night in the houses of study and prayer. And that's how Isaac viewed him, in a good light. Unfortunately, Esau had a very powerful beastly impulse, and he fell off. He lost his way. But not only that he lost his way, we see later on that he really rejected the whole yoke of heaven. And unfortunately, it seems that his behavior to his father either was just because he loved a human love for a father, or he was also trying to fool his father, knowing that later his father, he would get something out of it, blessings and other things out of his father. Isaac didn't know any of that, though. This is something we can see from the next story, in which Esau is so easily willing to sell his birthright, which was a combination of responsibility and reward. He so easily gave it up and says, I'm going to die. What do I need this birthright? Which is a paradigm of the wicked person, right? The wicked person says, oh, tomorrow I die. I might as well just enjoy myself. Very famously, there were different Greek cults and so on that they would just indulge any hedonism because tomorrow they may die, and they would just indulge and do anything. And that was the attitude that Esau had. His attitude is, tomorrow I'm going to die. Tomorrow I'm going to die. There's no tomorrow. I got to just enjoy my life today and do any hedonist, lustful thing or whatever comes my way. Try to enjoy this world. So basically, he rejected the yoke of heaven completely, and also rejected the idea in a world to come and in judgment, because he just was interested in this world. He seemed completely unconcerned. Anyway, but Isaac didn't see that in his son, and that's why he loved him. So again, the point is that what we can learn from this is that going into this world and affecting this world and living a proper life in this world is what God wants. True, sometimes we may feel, a thirst for holy things, and we want to just sit and continue studying. We want to study Torah and praying, and we need to do that. But at the same time, we need to have faith that God is everywhere. He's even in the most minutest and simplest things that, and all human functions, including bodily functions and everything. God is there. And so when we go out into the world and do all these different things, whether it's business or relationships with our friends, or even going to exercise at the gym, if we do this in a way where, we do it properly, in a way that is thoughtful about God, what God would want, then we're showing that we believe that God is everywhere in the world. He's not only in the synagogue or whatever it may be, but he's in all places. And so that way we bring a divine consciousness everywhere. And a higher level would to be that our intention is to do everything we're doing for the sake of heaven. And by doing so, we can turn all our activities into holy activities. And we can bind ourselves to God in everything that we're doing. And that's something, by the way, that is not limited to high levels of Jewish practice. And it's actually part of Jewish law that a person should make efforts to try to do that. It's in the Jewish code of law. But you may say, well, does Ben Noach have to do that? No, Ben Noach doesn't have to do that. However, we always quote that Ben Noach has a connection with, and I'm not going to say an obligation to do. However, all rational commandments and forms of divine service have a connection and relationship with the Ben Noach, with members of the nations. And if you study the duties of the heart, he talks about the fact that if a person is given everything, from their king, for example, a king saves their life and provides their sustenance on every day, and save them from many enemies, that the person would want to do everything for that king, and would have in mind, that all their efforts should in some way seek to find favor in the eyes of the king. So if that's the case, then the idea of doing everything with the intent for the sake of heaven, for in different ways, this is also something that is related to the practice of Ben Noach. So I want to just explain this a little bit. What is the idea of for the sake of heaven? Because the sake of heaven was what Isaac thought Esau was doing. He thought he was going out into the world and doing, hunting, something so low really as hunting, which kind of is something that has aspects of cruelty and is very aggressive and is a little bit kind of a primitive form of human behavior in a certain sense, right? But that really was I could say that might have been actually exactly what really astounded Isaac, is that despite going into doing such activities, Esau found a way to do it for the sake of heaven and to still remain connected to his father. And that's really what really impressed me. But to go back to this point is that what does it mean to do something for the sake of heaven? Okay, so let's give some examples. So I mentioned exercise before. So when a person exercises and they think, okay, let me go make my body stronger, so that if I'm going to be functioning better, I can then, study Torah and pray better. I can also, just in general, I'll live longer and healthier, and maybe my brain will be sharper for longer, and I'll be able to, use those powers to continue to advocate for God and teach people, or even just through that to take care of myself so others don't have to take care of me, right? But the point is not just do it for simply, so I want to look good, or for example, when a person exercises in order to, attract sexual attention, so then the act of exercising kind of has a connection to that side of the person and strengthens that side of the person. But even there, if a person is doing it in order to be more attractive to their spouse, whatever it may be, or to find a spouse, that might be a positive thing. But again, it's done with a good intent to find a spouse, to get married and have children, and so on and so forth. But so the point is the intent. What is the reason I'm doing the action? Making a living, working in order that I can support my family, others don't have to support me, that I can give charity. Another thing that can help to show that a person, this is kind of a higher level, it's brought in Hasidic works that a higher level of charity and a higher level of working for the sake of heaven is when a person seeks to minimize their own self-indulgence in the money they make and increase in their charity and what they give to others. In other words, when it comes to what they need, they minimize. When it comes to giving to others, they maximize. That's a high level. But if the person tries to do that type of thing, then they're really showing that their whole work is serving God, that their whole work, I spoke about this in previous lecture, that their whole business and livelihood is partnering with God. It's a holy endeavor. And when they do that, God partners with them. And they're going to see tremendous, tremendous divine assistance in their work. Okay. So this is my take about Isaac. I was very disturbed by this for a long time to try to understand why Isaac loved Esau, because we see that he was not a good, he was a man, a hunter. I mean, this is strange. And later on, we see something that's even stranger, which is the fact that both Isaac and Rebekah knew that Esau had married wives who were practicing idolatry. And he still seeks to give him the blessings. It's unbelievable. In chapter 26, it says that when Esau was 40, he married two Canaanite women, Hittites, and they caused a lot of aggravation and rebellion. They were rebellious against Isaac and Rebekah. So Isaac knew all about these bad wives he took, and he still wanted to give them the blessings anyway. So that shows us another thing, that Isaac embraced the imperfect person. He saw that his son he did some sinful things. He was doing things that were wrong. But again, he didn't know that he had gone off the path completely. The Esau he knew was still connected to him, was still helping his father, was still, talking about Jewish things, and to him, he's making mistakes, but he's still connected. And he wanted to continue strengthening that aspect, and he didn't want him to become lost, which unfortunately he did become lost. Anyway, there's a lot more to say about this in many different aspects, but the hour is late, and this was the message I wanted to bring out tonight. Any questions or comments?